Welcome to Mysteries and Crime, where we venture into the chilling shadows of true crime. Tonight, we delve into the killer clown, the John Wayne Gacy case, a monster hiding in plain sight. Could someone have stopped him earlier? Think you know the answer? Stay sharp. Our clue is woven within this story. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Between the early 1970s and late 1978, young men and boys vanished across Chicago. The common link? John Wayne Gacy, a respected businessman and entertainer. But behind his painted smile lurked something sinister. Before his arrest, he left behind a trail of horror. 33 lives lost beneath his home. December 22nd, 1978. A cold winter morning in Norwood Park Township. The police, armed with a search warrant, enter the home of John Wayne Gacy. The scent of decay is unmistakable. Officers push forward, peeling back the layers of a gruesome reality. Beneath the floorboards, in a cramped crawl space, the bodies are discovered, one after another, entombed in dirt. Detectives recall the horror of that moment, each unearthed body telling a silent tale of agony. The search reveals 26 victims beneath his house, 3 more on his property, and 4 dumped into the Des Plaines River. The press descends upon the scene, broadcasting the horror to the world. Each victim had a life, a family, and dreams. Yet for many, their stories were reduced to missing posters tacked onto telephone poles. Gacy's victims were predominantly young men and boys, some as young as 14. Most were runaways, drifters, or simply at the wrong place at the wrong time, vulnerable to his manipulative charm and false promises. One of the earliest known victims was Timothy McCoy, a 15-year-old boy hitchhiking home after spending time in Chicago. Gacy offered him a place to stay for the night. By morning, Timothy was dead, stabbed repeatedly in what Gacy later described as his first murder. He claimed that after McCoy unintentionally walked toward him with a knife, Gacy acted in self-defense. But investigators and experts believe McCoy was his first deliberate kill, setting a pattern that would repeat itself for years. Then came John Butkovich, an 18-year-old employee of Gacy's construction business. Butkovich was a responsible young man with a strong work ethic, but after demanding his overdue pay, he disappeared. His family searched relentlessly, even contacting Gacy, who brushed off their concerns. It would be years before John's fate was revealed. His body lay hidden in the crawl space beneath Gacy's home. Many victims shared a common fate, enticed with promises of work, friendship, or a party, then subdued through deception. Gacy would often use alcohol and drugs to weaken his victims before overpowering them. Once trapped, they were subjected to brutal torture and humiliation. His infamous rope trick, a method of strangulation using a tourniquet, became the signature of his brutal acts. He took pleasure in their suffering, often keeping them captive for hours before finally ending their lives. One of the most haunting aspects of Gacy's crimes was the sheer number of unidentified victims. Despite advancements in forensic science, several of his victims remain nameless, their families left without answers. Some bodies were so decomposed that identification was nearly impossible at the time. Modern DNA testing has helped, but the shadows of Gacy's crime still loom over many unsolved cases. Each body pulled from the crawl space was another piece of his chilling puzzle. They weren't just statistics or nameless casualties. They were sons, brothers, and friends, each with a story that ended too soon. To this day, their stories serve as a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking behind a friendly face. John Wayne Gacy was the last person anyone would suspect. A respected businessman, a beloved community figure, and even a Democratic precinct captain. He seemed affable, always quick with a joke, always ready to lend a hand. He attended neighborhood events, hosted elaborate summer parties, and even had his picture taken with prominent politicians. But behind that mask lurks something much darker. Born in 1942 in Chicago, Gacy endured a childhood of relentless torment at the hands of his alcoholic father, who berated him as weak and unworthy. Seeking approval that never came, young Gacy buried his pain beneath a desperate need to please others, but his father's abuse was only one part of his troubled upbringing. A childhood accident left him with a congenital heart condition, making him weak and often the target of bullying. Despite his troubled youth, he built a seemingly respectable life. He married twice, established a successful construction business, and was well liked by neighbors and colleagues alike. But the cracks in his perfect facade began to show. In 1968, Gacy was convicted of sexually assaulting a teenage boy in Iowa. He was sentenced to 10 years, but served just 18 months before being released for good behavior. Determined to rebuild his reputation, he returned to Chicago and ingratiated himself back into society. By the 70s, Gacy had perfected his double life. As Pogo the Clown, he entertained children at charity events, but his charm masked his predatory instincts. Behind closed doors, he lured young men into his home under the guise of work opportunities or companionship, only for them to meet a gruesome fate. Neighbors recalled strange occurrences, the sickly, sweet smell that wafted from his home, the eerie late-night digging in his backyard, and the occasional screams heard in the dead of night. But no one dared to suspect the truth. Law enforcement failed to connect the dots until December 1978, when the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Piest shattered Gacy's illusion of innocence. When investigators finally uncovered the horrors hidden beneath his home, the world could hardly believe the monster that had lived among them. The horror within John Wayne Gacy's house was unfathomable. Young men and boys lured into his home under the guise of job offers, friendship, or a simple drink. Once inside, Gacy would charm his victims, sometimes engaging them in a twisted game of handcuff tricks. They never realized it was their last moment of freedom. Gacy's primary method of murder was strangulation, using a tourniquet fashioned from rope. Many victims endured hours of torment before he ended their lives. His chilling words to one victim still haunt investigators. "You won't scream, you won't cry. You'll just go to sleep." He kept the bodies close, burying most in a cramped crawl space beneath his home. The stench of death seeped through the floorboards, yet he carried on with his double life, hosting barbecues, performing as a clown, and shaking hands with politicians. The few bodies that wouldn't fit beneath his house, he discarded into the Des Plaines River. For years, Gacy operated undetected. But in December 1978, he made a crucial mistake, targeting Robert Piest, a well-loved 15-year-old boy whose disappearance sparked an investigation too big to escape. The search warrant that followed uncovered his sickening secret, revealing the depth of his crimes. As bodies were exhumed from the crawl space, the scale of the horror became undeniable. The world watched in horror, and justice was now inevitable. But how did investigators finally piece together the puzzle? Stay with us as we uncover the investigation that sealed Gacy's fate. As fear gripped Chicago, law enforcement intensified their efforts. detectives first focused on missing person reports, realizing a disturbing pattern. Many victims had last been seen with John Wayne Gacy. Surveillance teams tailed him, observing his erratic behavior. Undercover officers frequented his haunts, looking for any leads. A crucial breakthrough came when Robert Peast's mother mentioned her son was last seen speaking with Gacy about a construction job. This led to a search warrant for his home. Inside, investigators found damning evidence: photographs, handcuffs, and a class ring belonging to one of the missing boys. The stench of decay hinted at something even more sinister beneath the surface. Identifying Gacy's victims proved to be one of the most complex forensic investigations of its time. Many of the decomposed remains were skeletal, making facial recognition impossible. Investigators relied on dental records and X-rays, painstakingly matching them to missing persons. The crawl space itself was a nightmare for forensic teams. The compact conditions, overlapping graves, and extensive decomposition complicated recovery efforts. Investigators meticulously mapped the remains, using grid analysis to ensure no evidence was lost. Modern forensic advancements have since provided new insights. DNA testing has identified victims previously classified as John Does, yet, even today, some victims remain unidentified, their stories lost to time. Could one of them still be waiting for a name? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. News of John Wayne Gacy's crimes sent shockwaves through Chicago and beyond. Parents clutched their children tighter, terrified that a monster had lived undetected for so long. Candlelight vigils were held for the victims, and the community demanded justice. The discovery of so many young lives lost shattered the illusion of safety. Rumors swirled. Had Gacy acted alone? Could there be more victims? The sheer brutality of his acts forced people to question just how well they knew their own neighbors. The media frenzy surrounding Gacy's case was unprecedented. Reporters flooded Norwood Park, broadcasting the horrors found beneath his home. Headlines labeled him the Killer Clown, a grotesque juxtaposition of innocence and evil. Television specials dissected his crimes, fueling public outrage. Every new detail sent waves of shock through the nation. Journalists pressed investigators for answers. How had he evaded justice for so long? The case became a cautionary tale, proving that sometimes the most horrifying monsters don't lurk in shadows. They smile among us. Even after his arrest, theories swirled about John Wayne Gacy. Some believed he hadn't acted alone. Could an accomplice have aided him in his gruesome acts? Others speculated on deeper motives, debating whether childhood abuse or an innate darkness had fueled his atrocities. Certain investigators noted similarities between Gacy's crimes and unsolved disappearances, wondering if he had more victims never recovered. Some believe hidden burial sites still exist. Despite his detailed confessions, unanswered questions remain. Could there be more to his twisted legacy? In February 1980, John Wayne Gacy's trial began. His defense attempted an insanity plea, arguing that no sane man could commit such horrors. The jury disagreed. After weeks of harrowing testimony and evidence, Gacy was found guilty of 33 murders, one of the most extensive serial killer convictions in U.S. history. On March 13, 1980, he was sentenced to death. Years of appeals followed, but justice stood firm. On May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. Yet even in his final moments, he showed no remorse. His last words, "Kiss my ass." Even with Gacy's execution, mysteries endure. Were all his victims truly found? Could he have had accomplices? To this day, 6 of his victims remain unidentified, their families left without closure. With advancements in forensic science, cold cases continue to be reopened. Perhaps one day, the full truth of Gacy's horrors will finally come to light. Until then, the question remains, could someone have stopped him sooner? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Gacy's crimes forever changed the way law enforcement handles missing persons. His case underscored the importance of tracking runaway reports and utilizing forensic science. It also left a permanent scar on Chicago. His house was demolished, but his legacy of terror lingers. True crime enthusiasts and forensic experts still analyze his case, searching for new revelations. His story is a grim reminder that sometimes evil hides in plain sight. Could such horrors happen again? The lesson is clear. Stay aware, stay informed, and never ignore your instincts. As we close this dark chapter, let's not forget tonight's clue. Could a single missed warning have stopped Gacy sooner? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.